What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so when it comes to Matt Fraction's run on Iron Fist, really with the exception of like the Immortal weapons, which we haven't really talked about yet, this really kind of wraps it up. Now the cool thing is that like the Immortal weapons really just kind of get folded in here, but the difference is that the Immortal weapons actually have one-shots. Immortal Weapons was a series of just like one-shot comics that ran over the origin stories of these different versions, these different iterations of the Iron Fist concept. Now there was one story called The Pirate Queen of Pinghai Bay, and I believe she was the very first Iron Fist. I'm not going to swear to that, but I want to say that was probably the case. If not, she was at the very least one of the earliest. But when it comes to the Immortal weapons, one of the things that Matt Fraction does here is he basically kind of breaks things down quick, fast, and in a hurry. Now keep in mind, in the last video, we had basically talked about, at least in the last Iron Fist story, we had talked about how Orson Randall was the Iron Fist before Danny Rand. But for reasons that we didn't know at the time, Orson Randall had basically taken off. Now, we found out at the end of that the reason why Orson Randall was no longer an Iron Fist was because he was basically asked to be inducted into, or at least to take part in the War of the Seven Heavenly Cities, or the Seven Capital Cities. It's basically a tournament that takes place once every 88 years. And the reason why this happens is because of the fact that within the realm of Iron Fist, we basically have 7 capital cities. Now, the cool thing is that we essentially have, Danny Rand kind of being taken before UT by, really by his mentor. The Thunder is really what we're just going to kind of call him now, Lei Kung the Thunder. I kind of feel like a great big huge long drawn out title might be a little much, but initially this picks up with Wendell Rand. Now keep in mind, Danny Rand's father had the opportunity to be the Iron Fist, and in fact, Orson Randall had told him that, your father was in line to be an Iron Fist. He was trained to be an Iron Fist, but he didn't become one. And that was always, that was always Danny Rand's question: why didn't my father become an Iron Fist? It was only recently he learned that was the case, but that was his question: why didn't my father become an Iron Fist? And so what this does is it kind of breaks away from Wendell Rand for a while, and it switches back over to Danny Rand again. And this is when we start to learn about the 7 capital cities. So within Marvel Comics, those of you guys who are brand new to the realm of Marvel Comics, or at least those of you guys who are familiar with this, bear with me, but for those of you guys who are brand new, in Marvel Comics, you have what are called pocket dimensions. And then the best explanation I've been able to figure out so far, whenever I offer this explanation to anybody, is to think of it as a house. If you imagine your house or your apartment as like the entirety of the Marvel Universe, then like the bathroom is a pocket dimension. That bathroom might be Asgard, and the closet might be a pocket dimension, and that closet might be Hell, where Mephisto resides. And then we could say like the laundry room would be a pocket dimension, and that would be Kunlun. Except it's only once every 10 years that the door opens, allowing you to go through. That's one of the reasons why you can't just go to Kunlun anytime you want to. You have to wait for basically things to align the way they do. Now, one of the things we're being told here is that in addition to Kunlun, there's actually several others. There's 6 other capital cities within the realm of the whole Iron Fist mythos. And much like Kunlun, it's once every, some period of time that the door opens, allowing an individual to enter one of those capital cities. In addition to that, where Iron Fist is like the avatar of Kunlun, he's the representative of Kunlun, there's a representative for each and every one of these capital cities. The first is in the form of Fat Cobra. And that's why I say each of these guys, at least as far as I'm aware, each of these guys has their own story. At least I think they do. There's the Bride of 9 Spiders. There's the Dog Brother #1, the Tiger's Beautiful Daughters. Yeah, the Tiger's Beautiful Daughter, rather. The Prince of Orphans, who's an absolute beast. He's amazing. And then of course we have Davos. Now again, we talked about Davos in the last video about how that all came together, but the way the tournament or the War of the 7 capital cities begins to open is just by exhibition. Now keep in mind, this is all ceremony. I mean, it's not like, the planet is engaged in war. Think of it like a tournament like Mortal Kombat or something like that. That's really all this is. It's really just kind of a conflict, the tournament that takes place. But the way this opens up is with an exhibition match. And it's really Fat Cobra that's kind of chosen to lead this exhibition to demonstrate the power of his capital city. And from here, we really kind of get into the actual tournament itself. But again, this kind of jumps back and forth between the idea of Wendell Rand and, his role in possibly becoming the Iron Fist. Now, I imagine a lot of you guys are probably here just for Danny Rand, just for the 7 capital cities. So we'll kind of, skim over that whole idea of Wendell Rand. I mean, in the end, we know he doesn't become an Iron Fist, so we don't really need like the ins and outs of that. But what we do know is that with Danny Rand, because he'd basically been given the book of the Iron Fist, it was passed on to him by Orson Randall, and that's where all the one-shots are contained, that within this book are also the tactics and also the various skills skills learned by different Iron Fists over the years. And so that's why for years and years and years and years, all Danny Rand really had is whatever martial arts he had at his disposal, whatever martial arts he learned learned within Kunlun, as well as, the power to actually harness his chi into a single, punch and create the Iron Fist. That's why in this story, his powers begin to grow, because he literally begins to go through this book, and he learns that the power of the Iron Fist is not just for punching things. A person can use a power of the Iron Fist to heal from injury. A person can use a power of the Iron Fist potentially to move through solid objects. It's really one of these circumstances where the book is out there, and it allows Marvel to sort of just create anything they want to allow Iron Fist to do anything he wants to do, as long as he's able to channel his chi appropriately. Now, there's a measure of propriety that goes on with this, right? I mean, like, Marvel's not going to say, oh, Iron Fist was able to channel his chi, and now he can warp reality. We're not going to see that. We're not going to see anything like that. It's just, within the realm of physical conflict, within the realm of how he's able to govern his own body, the various forms or the various uses of the Iron Fist will allow him to achieve a multitude of different goals. Now, in the middle of his studying, he's basically set upon by a woman, and we don't really know anything about her, but the initial indication here seems to be that she's possibly an assassin or something along those lines. But where, she begins to say, look, you have to look at the bigger picture. You have to recognize there's a lot of different things going on here. One of the things she says is, the question you have is why your father never became an Iron Fist. If you want an answer to that question, then you must yield in your battle against Fat Cobra tomorrow. You must lose. Now, it doesn't mean that he's going to basically lose the tournament. It simply means that he's basically going to lose this one conflict. There's a huge battle royale that goes on later on, and even then, there's basically a winner's bracket and there's a loser's bracket. So the way that it would go through is you would have all the winners would continually face off against one another until there's only one left out of all the winners, and all those individuals who have been defeated will face off against one another until there's only one left in the defeated, and then the champion of the winners and the champions of the losers will fight one another until there's only one champion left. So it's basically a double elimination tournament is really what it comes down to. But the idea here is that we also learn that because of the fact that the 7 capital cities, or because this tournament's taking place, what this means is that these different 7 capital cities line up a certain way. They basically get to a point where a person can begin crossing barriers from this central location into different places in the 7 capital cities. And this is when we learn that one of the capital cities is accessed through Hong Kong. Another capital city is accessed through another location. But the idea here is that this takes place once every 88 years because things just happen to align that way. So think of it like an eclipse or something like that. Eclipses happen every so often because you get a lunar eclipse and the moon aligns with the earth and the sun. You get a solar eclipse, and there's a different, I don't remember exactly what the idea is behind the different eclipses, but you guys understand what I'm saying, that like the sun, the moon, and the earth align in such a way that we get a certain effect. That's basically what happens here, that these different lands, these different pocket dimensions happen to line up in such a fashion once every 88 years that they end up creating this sort of central nexus point, and that's where the tournament takes place. Now, again, from here, because of the fact that Danny Rand basically had to yield in his battle against Fat Cobra, that's exactly what he does. He puts up a good fight. I mean, it's not like the fight, it's not like they say, okay, begin, and then he's just like, I yield. He doesn't just quit right off the bat. It'd be obvious as to what's going on. And keep in mind, with regards to him trying to find secrets, trying to understand about what's going on with regards to his father, he has to basically put on a show. And that's what's going on. I mean, he takes one hell of a beating, but what's also ironic is that he may or may not have been able to defeat Fat Cobra. And that's one of the things he says. Fat Cobra is extremely strong. He's extremely fast, that he's somebody that Danny Rand doesn't even know if he could beat. And so again, it's kind of cool because it's the idea that there are other fighters out there who are better than Danny Rand. And even within the realm of Marvel Comics, in terms of how they meet, there's been stories where Shang-Chi has defeated Danny Rand. There's been stories where Danny Rand has proven that he's equal to Shang-Chi in terms of his abilities. So again, it kind of goes back and forth, but ultimately we end up coming across this device, really, this machine that had been built by the father of Orson Randall. And what this does is it basically allows people to teleport. It's essentially a back door to the heavenly cities. And that's why this is interesting, is because under normal circumstances, you should only be able to access one of the 7 heavenly cities through a portal that opens once every 10 years, or a kind of bridge that's available once every 10 years. By using this back door, a person can bounce in and out as they please. And so what this does is it allows Danny Rand to begin going through and doing all these different forms of research, to beginning, all these different questions that he has answered, or I guess all these different getting answers to questions that he has, so on and so forth. But the issue is that his absence is drawing the attention of various people. Now, what we end up doing though is we end up actually kind of transitioning away from Danny Rand. We actually won't pick up with him for a little bit here, and we basically jump back to the tournament again. Now, the tournament's really cool in terms of how it goes down. Again, different people, these different fighters have different abilities. For example, Dog Brother number 1 is basically a master with a sword. What we end up finding out is that Bride of the 9 Spiders also has physical abilities that manifest directly from her, specifically the ability to basically discharge spiders from her body. Now again, this is just a demonstration of how exotic a lot of these powers can be. And that's one of the reasons why it was kind of cool, is because within Marvel Comics, we're used to some measure of a grounded nature when it comes to powers. Telepathy, telekinesis, energy projection, super strength, different things like that. We're not used to a person emitting spiders from their body, but it shows us how crazy some of these pocket dimensions can be. Now again, because of the fact that the actions of Danny Rand do not go unnoticed, the actions of Danny Rand are also kind of drawing attention to this idea that there's a larger undercurrent taking place here, that there seems to be a lot of dissatisfaction with what's going on in the realm of Kunlun, and the idea that people are basically looking to essentially cast off UT as the existing ruler of Kunlun and have somebody else take his place. Now, the reason why this is the case is because of the fact that when it comes to Kunlun, it's very much a restrictive territory. It's very much a restrictive land in the sense that the only people who really have rights there are men. Everybody else is just kind of limited in terms of what it is that they're capable of doing. You know, women are subservient. Women have small roles. They serve tea. They do different things like that. Only the men are allowed to learn martial arts. Now, for Lei Kun the Thunderer, this creates a bit of contention because for him, he believes that individuals who have the ability to learn how to become excellent martial artists should become martial artists, that people shouldn't be limited by their gender. Instead, there should basically be an ability for virtually anybody to fight off adequately. Now, it's not like, you know, Lei Kun is taking this stance because he just believes in equality. He does to a degree, but it's also the notion that UT could very well be passing up the most prodigious fighter ever to have graced the shores of Kunlun just because of the fact that she's a woman. It's entirely possible that this individual, a particular woman could arrive on the scene and be the most capable fighter to have ever shown up there if she had been trained accordingly, but she wasn't, and so in the end, UT is actually doing a disservice to Kunlun as opposed to benefiting it. But from here, we switch back over to the tournament again, and of course, we pick up with Davos, and what we end up finding is that with his fight, he's absolutely brutal. That, again, this tournament is really just a tournament to best the other person. It's a tournament to defeat the other person. It's not a tournament designed for the purpose of killing people, but instead, that's what ends up happening with Davos. Now, initially, when he goes against the tiger's beautiful daughter, she, of course, cuts off his hand, and that's kind of the crazy thing about this, but he takes it as an affront, and when he does, he lashes out. Of course, he regrows his hand, but he lashes out and actually beats her to the point, you know, where she almost dies. Now, he doesn't kill her, but the only reason why he doesn't is because his father, Lei Kun the Thunderer, steps in and says, you have to stop here. Now, again, we talked about why it is that Davos is kind of working against his father, why Davos is part of one of the 7 capital cities that's not Kunlun in the last video. So, you know, you can go ahead and reference that if you want an idea of what's going on. But again, this is really kind of a break away from what the tournament is supposed to be. The tournament is supposed to be a challenge of the greatest warriors. You fight until you yield or till you knock the person out. You don't beat them to the point that you almost kill them. Now, that seems kind of counter to what we would expect, right? Like a war of the 7 heavenly cities. We would expect this fight to take place, or these various battles to be like the, Kumite from Bloodsport. They effectively fight to the point where, it seems like it almost be a fight to the death. But in truth, it's really just this scenario where it's very much like the Kumite, where you just fight into submission. Death is frowned upon. And so because of this, it's really interesting to see these kind of rules, these kind of regulations. But ultimately, what ends up happening is that where the absence of Iron Fist has drawn a lot of attention, especially from UT, who wants to know where his champion's gone, Iron Fist, of course, ends up returning here. Now, again, the reason why UT was panicking so much is because UT was afraid of a repeat of history, in the sense that where Orson Randall abandoned Kunlun and basically reaped dishonor upon Kunlun itself, and, in light of the fact that he just didn't show up to honor the tournament, UT was terrified that Danny Rand would perform the same thing, that he would do the exact same thing. But again, we know just by virtue of reading Iron Fist stories that Danny Rand never runs away from a fight. That's something that he never does. But what this ends up doing is this actually ends up transitioning to Danny Rand more or less getting the full scoop from Lei Kun. And what we end up finding out is that, again, Lei Kun is training anybody who seems to be prodigious. And what Lei Kun does is he looks at the idea that anybody from any walk of life has the ability to become a great martial artist, that in his mind, it doesn't need to be limited by, a person's gender or age or so on and so forth. And so where he's a lot more open-minded, what's basically happening here is a revolution, that people are beginning to more or less talk about the notion of casting off UT as leader, ousting him as leader of Kunlun, and then having like Lei Kun or somebody else take his place. Now, the cool thing here, and this is why I love, this is really one of the reasons why I love Orphans so much, is because of the fact that with Prince of Orphans, he's just mysterious. Almost no one knows anything about him. Now, Prince of Orphans was supposed to face off against Fat Cobra, right? But what Prince of Orphans says is, well, because of like the extreme, nature, because of the fact that he's so hungry for combat, I want to fight Davos. Like he fought yesterday, and he showed that he had a desire for conflict. I want to fight him. And so it's actually kind of a break from tradition, but it's allowed usually. And the matches will have to be adjusted in terms of how layouts go, but for the most part, a lot of the fighters are generally given free reign over who they fight and win, so long as it's within the confines of the tournament grounds, and it's under the rules of the tournament. Now, the funny thing is that Davos, again, gets carried away. I mean, he's just as brutal as he ever was, but he gets his ass whooped quick, fast, and in a hurry. Dude, the Prince of Orphans is just like, look, man, like that chick you may have faced, the way you lost control against her, let me help you understand something. Davos, like, you're a fighter, and that's cool, but you're a child playing with things you can't even begin to understand. Let me remind you of your place in the bigger picture. You're down there, I'm up here, and let me show you just how far above you I am. In the span of the length it takes for Davos to throw a punch, he gets hit about 5 or 6 times and then is just taken out. Now, the reason why it was that the Prince of Orphans did this was not to just abuse Davos. It wasn't to torment him. It wasn't to embarrass him. It was to help him understand that men like themselves with incredible power are bound by rules. They have to function by those rules. Now, this is kind of cool because if you look at Marvel Comics, when it comes to a lot of characters in terms of how they view their abilities, almost all of it stems back to the classic Uncle Ben line. Great power, great responsibility, that kind of thing. With the X-Men, it's the same way. Charles Xavier's like, well, we as X-Men have a responsibility to use our powers responsibly and to teach the next generation on how to use theirs adequately as well. It's very basic. It's just one of those things where a lot of it seems to stem out of the Spider-Man landscape. But with regards to the Iron Fist, it's the exact same way. Now, these guys, especially, Prince of Orphans, has existed long before Spider-Man did. I mean, he was there a long time before Peter Parker. But what it tells us is that these are just intrinsic rules of a civilized society. That when people have incredible abilities, it's incumbent on them not to let their emotions run rampant. It's incumbent on them to think rationally, to think intelligently, not to get caught up in emotion. Because in the end, when people begin making decisions, when people jump into arguments emotionally, all they do is make themselves look foolish because they don't think rationally. And so the cool thing here is that initially Iron Fist Danny Rand goes to approach Prince of Orphans just because word has kind of reached the ears of everybody. The Prince of Orphans has consistently fought in the tournament longer than anybody else has. And so their idea is, hey man, can you teach us stuff? Prince of Orphans is just like, go, get out of my face. And so they end up just kind of going back to their table again. But that's something else that I hope you notice here, that despite the fact that these guys are fighting each other, there's not really, I wouldn't really say camaraderie so much as a shared respect, so much as a shared honor, because they're representing their own cities. How they conduct themselves is a reflection of their cities. If they conduct themselves irresponsibly like Davos did, if they conduct themselves cruelly like Davos did, then what they do is they bring shame upon their capital city. But if they conduct themselves intelligently, if they conduct themselves, with some manner of self-respect and respect for the others around them, then they bring honor to their capital city. So again, it's really cool to see this whole thing of this kind of give and take in terms of how it all functions. But at this point, we switch back over to Danny Rand, of course, later on that night, and he's actually joined by Prince of Orphans. And what we end up finding out is that Prince of Orphans is working alongside Lekun the Thunder. He's one of the people here who are really going to help Lekun the Thunderer cast off UT. Not only that, there are a lot of people who don't like the idea of this tournament. So it really kind of seems to be this wholesale revolution against everything as it exists right now. And it's a really cool idea because what this tells us is that when it comes to Prince of Orphans, his loyalties, are really to honor, to treating human beings as reasonable people, as opposed to, treating them like items to be used and then discarded accordingly. And so again, what this does is it basically picks back up again, with really Prince of Orphans kind of going around to a few people here and there and even recruiting them, to his cause, saying, hey, look guys, we are basically gonna launch a revolution. Can I count on you? And that's why I say this is when the respect comes into play. This is when the respect plays a role, because what this does is it has people ally themselves with Prince of Orphans. It has these people ally themselves with his cause, with what it is that he's trying to stand up for. So again, fast forwarding a little bit, kind of jumping forward a bit, this also, and we really didn't talk a whole lot about this, but this coincides with the idea of Hydra trying to take out the 7 capital cities, really Hydra trying to expand itself, make itself a little more solid. It dealt with the fact that Danny Rand had kind of vanished, and so Danny Rand was basically being pursued by the heroes for hire, Colleen Wing, Misty Knight, Luke Cage, but that was really kind of like a subplot to the existing story, and I didn't really think it was wildly important. I mean, it was interesting, but I didn't really feel like it was wildly important. But the desire of Hydra to locate Kunlun, to plunder its resources, and to use Kunlun for its own goal of basically, its continued path of world domination alongside, Luke Cage and Colleen Wing and Misty Knight tracking down Danny Rand. What this does this lead to this massive battle. And again, this is really when this revolution begins to take place. It's really this scenario where everybody begins to jump out. Now, of course, the portal to the the seven capital cities is destroyed when Danny Rand uses his Iron Fist, which of course, again, is cool to see that the Iron Fist can be used for a lot more than just punching through objects. You can destroy dimensional barriers. But what ends up happening here is it's more or less just these, different warriors facing off against Hydra, taking Hydra out, or at least this subsect of Hydra out pretty fast. But then it's UT also trying to bail out and find a way to engineer his own escape. But then, of course, we end up having really, one of the students of Lekun the Thunderer leading a rebellion, leading the charge against UT from inside Kunlun itself. So it's kind of like this double-faceted conflict, this double-faceted war. But in the end, Matt Fraction wraps things up pretty fast, which is usually what he's really, really good about. He's really good about wrapping things up, pretty quickly. Of course, it sees more or less UT ousted as leader. It sees Lekun the Thunderer stepping into the role of becoming head of Kunlun. And then, of course, he begins to sort of expand his role and become a little more immersed with regards to how it is that he deals with training new students and different things like that. But again, there's also kind of steps forward a little bit, leaving the idea open that the different members of the 7 capital cities may also have more of a role within the realm of the Marvel Universe, within the realm of like New York or the realm of Danny Rand or something along those lines. But again, this is really where like Matt Fraction's run ends. And from here, it actually picks up with Dwayne Straczynski, I think it is, but he kind of takes things in a different role. He ends up bringing out like the 8th capital city, and things kind of go in a direction that I wasn't too partial with. But for here, this little 2-story or this 2-story arc, there's, these 12 issues, 13 issues or something like that. It was designed to kind of expand the Iron Fist mythos and to say there's a little bit more to Iron Fist than the idea that Danny Rand's just running around punching people by channeling his chi through his fists. Instead, there's these 7 capital cities, and there's these, rebellions and so on and so forth. And so again, it created kind of a cool situation. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.